Hello YouTubers, I want to welcome you to another edition of Bargain Bin Gear, and this video is part 2 of why do these 3 identical amps sound different. Now, before I made the upgrades, and I hope that you're subscribing because I often reference old videos, right? And last time, you know, I had 3 deluxe reverbs by Fender, 65 reissues, and each one sounded different. And I particularly liked the one that I had just gotten, right? Sounded great. And so I pulled out my 2 old ones, and man, they just didn't sound good at all, and not very usable either. Kind of reminds me of a Hot Rod Deluxe, you know, because of the volume issue. Now, sure, if I was playing, you know, big stadiums or something, I'd need that kind of volume, you know. But in all truthfulness, you know, especially playing at home and things, or in the studio room, you know, I don't need a huge amount of volume, but I need it to be dynamic enough that I can turn the knob and get the full range of volume, you know. Whereas the way that it was now on these 2 old deluxe reverbs, I turned the volume to 2 or 3 and that was it. It was huge sound, you know, but then it would go right into overdrive, basically. You know, now some people desire that, but I just wanted a clean sound that I could use. And when I got this new deluxe reverb, that's exactly what I got, you know. Now, I don't know exactly what's been done to this new one, but they sure sound different, or sure sounds different than the 2 others that I had. The very first thing, again, is the volume issue. You know, it made it so I never played those amps. They were just too freaking loud. And I don't know if you've ever played a Hot Rod Deluxe, but that's just ridiculous. I mean, you know, you turn it up past 2 and it's just so massive and loud, unusable, really. So, first thing I looked at was a tube change, right? And hopefully that would control the volume and things. And, well, you can see the results of that here. Okay. Now listen, the other day, my cat Mitty ran up on a speaker, and on that speaker was a little tray, and it had all kinds of little guitar parts and stuff. Well, he knocked it over, and I remember seeing on the floor from that little tray one of these, a little tube, right? Now, it was on the floor, and I figured, oh man, well, I don't want to step on it, you know, that could be really bad news, you know, with the glass and stuff. But then I forgot about it. So it was laying there, and so I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, maybe this will work. And so, listen to this. This is unbelievable. So I picked it up, and I looked at it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But it was ECC, right? Basically, 3381, I think it is. I thought, well, wait a minute, that's a 12 AT7. And I thought, maybe this will tame the volume. I did a little research online and things, and there's a V1 for the normal channel, and V2 for the vibrato channel, which is what I'm using, because it allows you to also use the reverb. And so I thought, well, changing out, 12AX7 and swapping it with the 12AT7 might help me manage the volume, right? And now listen, this tube, right? I can tell why I set it aside. Well, all the pins were bent. Take a look. You see the pins there? Let it focus a little. Come on now. Anyway, there's a bunch of little pins here. They were all bent out of shape, right? So there's very little hope of putting the tube in, and getting the pins to fit. So I thought, oh well. But so I tried to unbend the pins, and believe it or not, I actually got it to fit in the socket, no problem. So I must have straightened them out okay, because they looked like they had been stepped on or something. I don't know. So the goal was to basically kind of get it to sound more like the new one, right? So I pulled this one out, and this is basically a 12AX7, and I replaced it with a really used 12AT7. And I'm going to show you the difference here. All of a sudden the volume is really usable on that amp. I mean, I have the volume set at 4, right? Well, 4 would have blown me out of the room with the 12AX7. In other words, with this tube in it, there's, and just to demonstrate, I can show you that. Okay, now this is the deluxe reverb I had recently gotten. Here's the one with the tube I got off the floor here, and I put it in this, my old deluxe reverb. And I think they're pretty similar. Much better sounding, and the volume's more controllable. And here's the new one I had gotten. And here's the old one. I mean, that's unbelievable. And I mean, I came this close to ordering a new tube, you know, as you probably do anyway, but there you go. There's the difference in sound. Now it's much closer to the new one. In fact, it may sound a little tiny bit better, you know. Now I tried to check all the tubes in this one, and well, a lot of them were like backwards. Of course, they just had to be, where, you know, you could read on the tube exactly what it is. They were backwards, so you couldn't see them. But I have an idea. I'm just going to take a little mirror, you know, and hold it, and then I could read it off the mirror without removing the tube. I mean, that's an idea. Anyway, basically what it came down to is that the 12AT7 gives me a much more reasonable volume, you know, compared to the way that it was. And the way that it was just terrible. Just, you know, I couldn't use it. It was horribly loud and uncontrollable, you know. So what a stroke of luck. I thought, I still can't come over it. But it gets better. Okay. This morning, I thought about it, right? And I had the other Fender Deluxe reverb, and the sound was so lousy I didn't even put it on the video. I was ashamed. It just sounded like crap. Excuse my French. Just horrible, though, really. You know, and well, you know, so I thought, well, maybe I need to order a tube for it and see if that helps, you know. And well, I remember I did a lot of tube experimentation with the Supro before I found the right one for me, the right combination. And I remember that I had left the tubes that I had tried, you know, in the back of the Supro. So I went there, and in this little box, sure enough, guess what? Another 12AT7. Right, it was actually an ECC 81, but Yeah, 12AT7. Just what I was looking for. Unbelievable. So, I went to the third deluxe reverb that had the horrible sound. I wouldn't even put on video. And pulled out in the V2 position, right? A 12AX7 tube. And so I replaced it with a 12AT7. This time around, the sound was a lot better. And the volume was a lot better, but still awfully louder. It was louder than my two others now, but better sounding than it was before. Okay. Now, I don't know if it's been modded or what, but most definitely louder, even with the 12AT7. Now that may take further experimentation, but let's take a listen to it. So the tube change made a huge difference. All of a sudden these deluxe reverbs are super usable, you know, volume wise, and I still got a great amount of volume if I wanted it, but it was just more controllable, you know. I would taper what you'd expect, you know, going to 2, 3, 4, even 5, right? The volume would increase, right? Whereas before, it was like you go to 2, 3, and then, you know, blew you out of the room. Unusable. Sad. So, replacing the tubes. And I experimented with this, too. Trying different tubes in different locations. V1 and V2. V1 is the tube socket that controls the normal channel, and V2 is the tube socket that controls really the vibrato channel on the deluxe reverb. And I mean, I use the vibrato channel for now anyway. Why? Because on the normal channel you don't get the reverb and you don't get the vibrato. Lame. And that's a Fender idea. Sad. Okay. And as we saw, the tube changed to an AT7 instead of an AX7. Took care of the volume issue. And made all 3 amps super usable and things. And this came about because of the new one. I didn't change any tubes in it. It was already done for me, I guess. So, I mean, and they almost sound identical. However, one thing I should mention, the Fender, man, I don't know if they're high or what, but there's something called a bright cap. Right? It's this little $1 orange capacitor, right? And they solder it into the board, the PCB board, right? It's in between the input jack and the volume jack. And on the vibrato channel, it's always on, the bright switch, right? It makes pedals sound fizzy. Gives you a kind of weird top end, quite frankly. And what a dumb idea. I mean, you've got to be a real moron, right, to think this was a good idea. I mean, on the clean channel of a deluxe reverb, you know, most people want a clean sound that's real warm and things. That's not everyone, granted, right? But, I mean, I have other tube amps and they have a bright switch. I never use the bright switch, and I don't think it sounds good either. And I have a very big suspicion that the one that I got recently, because it still sounds a little different than the two others, they've gotten rid of the bright cap. It's a common modification, right? Or if you're real lucky, you could get a switch that you can turn it on and off if you really wanted it. But I don't. So, at the soonest opportunity where I can find a local tech to do that, I will have them both without bright caps. Psh, what a dumb idea. And not only that, you can't even switch it on your own, you know. And the problem is, in my little town, right, there are no amp techs. I mean, how sad is that? Wow, that's really pathetic. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, but the last time I checked, you know, what's sad is I talked to a guy a long time ago who was an amp tech, and I was trying to contact him again and found out he had died, unfortunately. But anyway, at some point I will have that done to these two Fender Deluxe reverbs. As they are now, though, they're super usable and very, very pleased. And really, that tube change came kind of as an accident, really. It just had never occurred to me, you know. And it's crazy. I mean, they would sell a lot more amps. Now, granted, I guess they want people to try out a Fender Deluxe reverb and, you know, and turn it up to 3 or 4 and it blasts them out of the room, I guess. That's what they... Makes no sense, you know. There's many more amps if they would, in the very beginning, put an AT7 instead of an AX7. Because then all of a sudden the volume taper makes sense, you know, and you can set the volume where you want it. Get a fantastic clean sound, right? And you're not limited to that volume, you know, at least for my purposes. So there's my rant. But I am very pleased overall, you know. But the bright cap issue is just, you know, and of course, you know, they don't make it all that easy to get to. You know, I mean, you have to pull the chassis out and stuff, you know, and I think a tech might be better off doing that. But if not, I'll do it myself. I mean, you know, they're a pretty good idea. And it's real simple. I mean, you basically, you can just cut one leg of that little capacitor and that's it. But anyway, but as it stands now, I'm very pleased with it. And one thing I have to say, with the new AT7 tube instead of the AX7, I almost had to take a double take because it sounds so much like my little Fender Super Champ X2s. It's hard to believe, even. I mean, I mean, they sound identical, quite frankly. You know, now granted, the Deluxe reverb sounds bigger, or can sound bigger, but they are very, very similar. And as a result, what I found is that during the day, it's a lot of fun to play the Deluxe reverb combo amp, because it's a little louder and bigger. But in the evenings, you know, you don't want to disturb anyone. Those little Super Champ X2s do a really great job. So I'm really pleased. For right now, it's as close as I can come to on those two old ones to match the sound of the new one. And all three sound great and are very usable. Whereas before, as I mentioned, the new one works great, but the two old ones, no wonder I wasn't playing them, you know. There you go. And I suppose, you know, if I ever have to play a gigantic place, you know, which is not likely, but whoever, you know, you never know, I guess. But if I did, I can always change the tube back and get that huge, huge sound, you know. But it just doesn't make sense, really, you know, if you want the clean headroom and that kind of thing. Alright, so actually this was very worthwhile, you know, and I never realized how drastic the tube change would be in a deluxe reverb, but that you'd ever need to make one, because it was plenty clean. Alright, so these are things to think about if you own one of these amps or are thinking of getting one. I mean, I highly recommend them, but I would definitely change out that tube. I think you'd be very pleased. It's more what you'd expect, you know. I don't know why Fender does this, you know, where they make the volume taper crazy, you know, to go to 2 to 3, but if you go any higher, you're distorting and and it's so loud, it blows you out of the room, you know. Alright, very good. See you next time.